All right. I've been looking forward to this one. What it takes to run a sub-3-hour marathon, the numbers and the workouts. So I hear the 3-hour marathon goal thrown around a lot. Probably that and 3:15, 3:30, they're the big ones. Right, so a large pool of the runners that I work with, 35 to 45-year-old working professionals, you know, they got careers and families and just generally busy lives. And they come to me and they say, Dr. Will, I want to run a sub-3-hour marathon. Is it realistic? Is it possible? Can you help? And they're often a bit worried, like they've left it a bit late, you know. And so within this podcast, I want to talk you through what are the numbers, what do you need to be able to do to make a sub-3-hour marathon goal realistic. So the first number we need to look at is our threshold pace. So that's lactate threshold pace, kind of the best sustainable pace for anywhere from 45 to just over an hour. So that's going to be 3:50 to 4 minutes per K, or around a 6:10 to a 6:26 minutes per mile. So what I'd want to see is like a 39-minute 10K or a 1:26 half marathon. If you can't do a sub 40-minute 10K, you have next to no chance of doing a sub 3-hour marathon. Now, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but this is just, you know, what I'm seeing out there and what the science says. So your sub 3-hour target pace is going to be 4:16 minutes per K or a 6:52 minute per mile. So which means your 1K or 1 mile splits need to be between 4:10 to 4:20 minutes per K, or like a 4:42 to a 7-minute mile. So unless you're running on a treadmill, you need to be capable of running those faster ends of that spectrum, so that 4:10 minute per K or the 6:42 minute mile, without going over your threshold or even too close to your threshold. Because if your threshold's like slower than 4 minutes a K or like a 6:26 minute mile, it means you'll be burning too much carbohydrate, you'll be accumulating too much lactate or acidity, and subsequently building fatigue too quickly in the early stages, which is almost guaranteed to have you hitting the wall in the final kind of 30 minutes of the run. You see, what we want to be able to do is, well, one is just pace super evenly, but it's never going to happen. It just, due to the nature of the course, maybe it's slightly undulating, even if it's only 1 or 2% gradient. It just means that your pace is going to fluctuate from, you know, the fast end of the spectrum to the slow end of the spectrum, and then we're going to hit our midpoint average of our goal. Right, but if you're not capable of hitting those faster times, even if it is just a slight downhill, or if you're with a bunch, you know, a pace group, and they just accidentally go 5 to 10 seconds per K quicker, which can happen, it means right at that point, if your threshold's slower than a 4-minute or a 6:26 minute mile, then you're going to be really close to your threshold and just super burning through your carbs, accumulating a bit of lactate, and it's the point at which you are now rapidly accumulating fatigue, more so than if your threshold is, you know, at the fast end of that spectrum, say like a 3:50 or a minute per K or a 6:10 minute per mile. So that's kind of threshold one. Like I want to be able to see those numbers, that kind of just under 4 minute per K, or around that 6:10, 6:20 minute per mile threshold, and the 39-minute 10K, 1:26 minute, you know, an hour 26 half marathon. If I'm seeing those, I'm confident. I can get you in shape, and you know, a sub 3 hours based off that, realistic. But then that's only one part of the equation. That's actually only one threshold of the threshold equation, because we have two important thresholds. The one I just outlined was the anaerobic threshold. So sort of once you go above that threshold, your diminishing returns, you know, how long we can exist above that, totally limited. It's beyond steady state. Whereas our first threshold, say our aerobic threshold, is that point where we enter into an almost steady state, which is that we can't do it forever, but we can do it for quite a long time. We're right in this sweet spot, right? That marathon, that tempo intensity where, yeah, we could do it for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. If you're incredibly fit, you could maybe even push out 4 hours and slightly beyond. But you're definitely accumulating lactate, like it's there. You're generating lactate. There's an anaerobic component to your energy production, utilization. But it's at a rate that is able to be buffered either by the supporting muscle cells that can regenerate or metabolize lactate back into a glycerol or acetyl more usable form, or it's that the bicarbonates can easily be buffered by the CO2 pool, right? So we're steady state in that sense, I guess is what I'm saying, that first threshold. And it is really your running economy or how efficient you are at your marathon pace, along with your muscular conditioning. So I guess your underlying aerobic fitness and your muscular conditioning impact your first threshold, which is going to be incredibly important once we know, or I know, like you've hit those anaerobic threshold numbers, those capacities. Yep, 3-hour marathon's realistic. So now we need to work on your capacity or your aerobic fitness. Like if you've never run over, say, 20 Ks or, whatever, 13 miles, your muscles will lack the conditioning to exert a steady state tempo for 3 hours. And you end up breaking down after, I don't know, maybe 2 hours, whether you can run a sub 40-minute 10K or not. So, first, do you have the capacity? Yep, you can run sub 40 10K. You've got a threshold that's within the ballpark that we need. But now it's how economical are you and what's your conditioning at marathon pace? So a test I'd like is around, you want to do like 20 Ks, 90 minutes at goal marathon pace. Right, without your heart rate going above zone 3 or just above zone 3, maybe right at the end it can go above. So that's around 95% of your lactate threshold heart rate. And I would consider this like right in amongst the steady state, because you want to be able to get through half of a marathon without it really touching the sides. Like, yes, you can burn some carbs, that's all cool. You can have a component of anaerobic metabolism, but it's such that energetic supply and demand is sustainable, right? As long as you're getting some carbohydrates in and you're not drastically speeding up at any point, then you're in a point where you can definitely continue on and, all things being amazing, execute an even or negative split. So you need to be able to run, like 20 Ks, 90 minutes at your goal marathon pace or power without your heart rate decoupling. So that is where you would say do this even at 15 Ks. Once your heart rate starts entering into zone 5, it's getting into up to close to 180, above the 170s for a lot of people. That's not sustainable. The work rate is far too high. Regardless if it's 40 degrees or you haven't hydrated properly, it's just you're not in a sustainable state. You're not in a steady state. And so that shows that either the underlying aerobic fitness or the muscular conditioning isn't there to support your anaerobic threshold that is required for running 3 hours. Right? So how do we do that? What's the training? What do I need, Will? Like how much, how far, how hard, who, what, where, when? And, oh man, this is a hard one. So I think it was Jack Daniels who answered a question along those lines. It was like, how much training should I do for X event? And so he said, as little as you can get away with to get your desired outcome, right? So not more, but whatever you need to get your outcome is going to be the right amount of training. And then, I like that answer because throughout my coaching career, I've seen people roll out of bed and run a sub 40 10K. Then I've seen dedicated runners struggle to break 20 minutes for 5K after like a couple of years of consistent training. So there's no blanket answer. But if you are capable of running sub 3, so you have the capacity, you have the genetics, the physiology, then I believe there are 2 weekly workouts that would get any runner under the holy 3-hour barrier, should they have the capacity. So there would be 1, threshold intervals of 5 to 15 minutes, so that's zone 4, 5, right around that 100% threshold intensity, kind of 95 to 105% of your threshold. And number 2 would be a marathon tempo running of 10Ks or more, so kind of 30 minutes or more in zone 3. Outside of these 2 workouts, all you really need to be doing is some easy aerobic training. How much? Well, I mean, kind of as much as you can handle without affecting the quality of those 2 key workouts, the threshold and the marathon tempo, and obviously without getting injured or sick. Whatever that is for you. But everyone needs to be doing 2 quality workouts a week to be able to hit their goal. And I see those being most effective as the threshold and the marathon tempo. All right, Will. All right, Dr. Will, tell me about these magical workouts, I hear you say. Okay, so running a sub 3-hour marathon or any marathon time relies on the 2 thresholds I talked about, the aerobic and the anaerobic. So the aerobic being with oxygen, the anaerobic being without oxygen. The higher you can get those thresholds, the more sustainable marathon pace becomes. So therefore, we need to work those thresholds consistently to stimulate and adapt the desired metabolic outcomes or pathways. So that is the glycolytic pathway, both the aerobic and anaerobic glycolytic pathway, as well as the transporter enzymes or proteins, both in and out of the muscle cell, as well as the cardiovascular stimulus that is required to hit those thresholds. That's just metabolically. Then we have the neuromuscular recruitment, how comfortable you are, how much neurological input you need to exert to run at a certain pace. So we need to work those thresholds, in my opinion, so that we can progress them and we can make marathon pace more comfortable and more sustainable, and we can improve that economy. So the threshold intervals, typically I'm looking at wanting to hit 30 minutes of work within the workout. So how you skin that cat is completely it's dependent on your physiology and training history. So my recommendation is start conservatively, so aiming for like a 5-minute or a 1-mile repeats in zone 4. So like 95 to 100% of your threshold, 2-minute recoveries. So those recoveries can be probably initially just like a walk, but as you build fitness and conditioning, you can start to increase those as floats where you're like running, and then you can start to run or jog, and then you can start to run in zone 2. And so you're really minimizing the recovery as you progress through the weeks of training. And then you can build from there. So the goal isn't to overexert yourself in these workouts, right? You're massaging your target metabolic pathways to stimulate progression. If you go out and try and turn yourself inside out and hit whatever pace or power output on the first interval, you'll just be missing the workout's physiological goal. Those workouts are something else. They're half marathon, high intensity, threshold progressive workouts. What we're looking at here, when we're not trying to improve anaerobic work capacity or sustained time above threshold, we're trying to just progress that threshold, and we're trying to we're going to have a relatively high volume with workouts of 2 hours or more at the weekends, so we can't be midweek turning ourselves inside out on thresholds. Then you've got the marathon tempo, and I think the cornerstone of specificity are these goal pace or power output runs. So the aim is to build the amount of time you run at marathon pace or power while maintaining a metabolic steady state. So I see these workouts as being either bottom up or top down. So a bottom up would be you start with like 10 Ks at marathon pace in week 1 and progress by adding a few more Ks or miles or time each week. So that's, I'm going to do, a 15-minute warm-up, 10 Ks at marathon pace, 10 Ks cool down, or not 10 Ks, sorry, 10 minutes, and you can just build from there. Then that's kind of the bottom up, where you're building from the bottom end of a marathon block up. And then the top down is adding 5 Ks of marathon pace at the end of your long run. So you progress by increasing the distance or duration of the marathon pace segment at the end of your long run, so progressive runs. And the part of easy aerobic running reduces. So let's just say you have a 25K run. Standard progressive run would be you'd run for 20 Ks and then you'd do 5 Ks at marathon pace. The next week you might do 17 Ks of easy aerobic running and then 8 Ks at marathon pace. And then you would build, right? So then you've got 10 Ks easy and then you've got 15 Ks at marathon pace. And so that's the top down, where you're already hitting whatever, 25, 30 Ks, 20 miles, and then from the back end, you just keep building more marathon pace into that. So either way, however you want to do it, you can also, break it up with short intervals, depending on where you live and all of this. So you could do 5 by 5K, 3 by 8K, 2 by 6 miles. Either way, you should end up with around 25 to 30 kilometers. So around, what's that, like kind of 16, 20 miles worth of marathon pace running as your final progression. So, these are fairly basic, but that's what we want to be able to achieve a few weeks out from our event. That kind of, for a lot of people, it's going to be 2 hours to 2.5 hours of marathon pace. Probably 2 hours is enough, actually, of marathon pace work. Then what about like weekly Ks, weekly miles? What's the golden number there? How much? Who cares, right? Honestly, in my first episode, why pro runners don't care about their weekly mileage, and neither should you, one of my most popular episodes out the gate, I outline why I don't care about weekly mileage. So the formula I've outlined here, it can be done on 60 Ks a week, or it can be done on 160 Ks a week. Your training is working when you're completing your quality workouts and seeing progression towards your desired outcome. So if you get that on 5 hours of running, or you get that on 10 hours of running, we want to see progression and we want to see quality within the workouts. When those two things don't happen, your training is not adequate. It's most probably over rather than under volume. Okay, let's recap. Let's go over it. Some of the key takeaways from this. How to run a sub-3-hour marathon. 1. All right, you need a lactate threshold of around 3 minutes to 350 to 4 minutes per K. So it's around a 610 to a 626 minute per mile. Numbers associated with like a 39-minute 10K or a 126 half marathon. You got those or better, you're in the ballpark. Sub 3 hours is realistic. You need to be able to run 20 Ks or 90 minutes at marathon pace without exiting a steady state. So that's like heart rate zone 4. You need 2 quality workouts a week, threshold intervals, and marathon tempo runs. 4, quality over quantity. There is no magic number in terms of anything, really. So focusing on your performance within your workouts, not your Strava uploads. All right, if you need help figuring this stuff out, you're like, I'm pretty close to those numbers. How can I progress them better? I've got heaps of training plans, marathon-specific training plans, base phase, race phase training plans. I've got my Pro Coach formula, which you can download. And otherwise you can hit me up one-on-one. Reach out at Dr. Will O'Connor on Strava. All right, till next time, guys. I hope that helps. Give me a shout out if you hit that sub 3. Till next time, happy running. Hey teams, thanks for listening. If you're looking to get more tips, tricks, and advice from me, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Dr. Will O'Connor and share, like, review, give some stars for the episode. It really helps me get the word out and I hugely appreciate it. If you do so, give me a tag on Instagram. I'll be sure to share you in my stories and reach out via the DMs. Alright, till next time guys, have a good one.